Okay, hi guys. Yeah, a bit of the graveyard shift, but hopefully we'll help you along. I'm Ted McKenna. I'm a lecturer in structural engineering at CIT. I've worked in the former life in a very busy boom period as a structural engineer in practice, so I know lots of the traditional approach and how it goes. And the research I'm presenting today is on the potential for BIM to be integrated into the management of our national roads infrastructure. Overview of the presentation, what I'll cover, fundamental research question, how it came about, the question that I think needs to be answered, building information modelling and asset management, a bit of an overview, most of you are probably well aware of it, road infrastructure in Ireland, the methodology to the research and the findings, and obviously some conclusions. So in terms of the fundamental research question, most of you have probably seen this or close to it. Even this morning we saw the German delegation and they had a version of this definition, and the key bit for me is defined as existing from the earliest conception to demolition, which begs the question, if you haven't adopted BIM from earliest conception, is it too late? Do we just ignore BIM, or is there potential for us to adopt it? So if we look briefly at asset management and it's integrated into building information modelling, this is the ideal, if we do BIM properly, that we will seamlessly gather information, not just during the design and construction phase, but on into the operations phase. You compare that to the traditional approach of this sawtooth effect, where we lose valuable information along the way. And in particular, probably the biggest loss, and maybe as a structural engineer, I don't see a lot of it, because we were well gone from site by the time the handover happens, but for MEP, etc., there's a big loss between handing from the finished construction to the operations. And if we put an effort on that, so everybody who's looked into BIM has probably heard of the McKenna curve, which I have down there in the bottom left-hand side of the slide, where if we bring forward our efforts, we can realise better results. Now if we take that into the operational phase, if our information isn't where we think it is, if it isn't what we think it isn't what we need, then we're going to have to expend a bit of effort in trying to get that information. Compare that to if we have a BIM approach, which the whole idealistic thing is that we have information when we want it, where we want it, in the format we want it. Then we expend less effort. Therefore, when you're doing minor maintenance works or major renewal works, you'll expend less effort, and therefore you will save money. In terms of asset management, it's defined as a coordinated activity of an organisation to realise value from assets. And it's becoming a very big thing. I know it's been around for a good while, but more and more it's a big thing. In terms of what an asset is, then it's an item, thing or entity that has the potential of actual value to an organisation. The standards which covers are the recently released ISO 55000 standards, and they're built off of the original PAS 55, which BSI have reported as their most popular standard of all time. If we look at the pyramid of how asset management is viewed, you have the corporate organisation, and their role is to set out our organisation's strategic goals. Management of the asset portfolio, capital investment optimisation, and sustainability planning is a key role. And managing the asset, then you're looking at sustained performance and optimisation of risk. And finally, down in terms of managing the assets themselves, you're looking at optimising the life cycle activities. So if we look at the lower three tiers, that's really deemed to be covered under the ISO 55000. If we look at the lowest tier of that and see how does it blend in with the most recent UK publications or standards, you have the acquire the assets, or you create the asset, then you have the utilise, maintain and renew or dispose. And the last three are part of the operation. The first is your capital expenditure, the second being your operational. In terms of the UK, PAS 1192 covers the first phase, and then for the operation, PAS 1192 Part 3. Digital plans of work, if you adopt them, 1 to 6 in the first CapEx, and 7 to N in the operational. And finally, as you gather that information, you gather it during the design and construction as a project information model, while when it transfers over to the operational, it's an asset information model. And that's how it sits on top of, for those of you who are well versed in 1190 or in BIM in terms of the UK, this is a variation of the diagram that they have adopted. Now, it all comes from the top, so you have to, and it reminds me a little bit sometimes of the conversation on health and safety. If you have the client driving health and safety, you'll get the guy on the ground who's hammering the nails in protected. Likewise, if you can get the person at the top to drive down an information management strategy, then the people at the bottom will have to conform. So organizational information requirements are set out, and they generate what you need in order to run your asset. This is where I see a lot of problems, where clients don't really know what they want. And then that informs your employer's information requirements, which are absolutely key. Okay, you'll have benefits from applying all different elements of BIM as contractors, as designers, but from an employer's point of view, you need to be able to define what that is. And it's a simple thing of plain language questions. And when I saw that at a few, I think David Phelps was giving a presentation on it, and I was like, plain language questions, what exactly are they? And I got my hands on a template they had in the UK. And to be honest, a lot of the questions are the same questions that you ask day in, day out for the last 50 years on normal contracts. Okay? It's just a matter of putting them down and making sure that they get answered at various stages. So once you have your employer's information requirements, that will inform your project information model, and what it requires, your asset information requirements will inform your asset information model and what is required at that stage. And of course, the vital key is that we get from the project information model into the asset information model, that information goes in through seamlessly. So the idea is we're seamlessly gathering information, graphical, non-graphical documentation over the life cycle. But the key aspect of BIM is we're gathering it in a common data environment, or that more importantly, that we have a single source of truth, that we don't have duplicate things that don't actually match up. So back to the research question, or back to the question rather than being any deep research question, is like, what if we haven't adopted it? And I consider this in terms of the national road infrastructure, where for the boom years we did quite a lot of building of roads, which are great, because you come up to Dublin now, it's a straight 2-hour run, as opposed to in the old days where you went through every town on the way. So there'd been a huge addition, but now we're looking forward, and we've a difficult current economic climate. We're building less, but we have a whole pile of existing asset infrastructure out there. So do we kind of retrofit BIM? Do we look at BIM? How do we consider it? So I looked at the national roads. If we look at them, we've about 5,300 kilometres of national road, split 50-50 between primary and secondary. Of the primary, around 1,200 or a little over 1,200 kilometres are dual carriageway motorway. And if we look at how they're managed and maintained and operated, public-private partnerships take care of 328 kilometres, local authorities take care of 152, and the one I focused on was the 744 kilometres, which are covered under these very new MARC contracts, or motorway maintenance and renewal contracts. What are these contracts? There are 3 separate contracts across the country. Basically, three separate joint ventures are managing the road network. One in the kind of east-southeast, one in the south, and one in the Midlands west. So they're managing 27% of our primary roads network. All this commenced in 2012-13. They're of a 5-year duration, with potential of 2 add-on years before it goes back out to tender again. The lump sum activities in terms of operational maintenance are 18 million per year. That's excluding renewal works, where maybe they're adding a service station along the way or something like that, which would be completely new work. A key deliverable, and this is what again got my interest in there, a deliverable is that the schemes is to provide, manage, maintain and use asset data within an inventory management system. So they've recognised that data is important. So in the industry context, I've said it before, and we don't need reminding of it, we've a major challenge, especially with a lot of infrastructure. We could bring up the conversation of Irish water, and we need to make sure we're spending our money wisely. We have to look at the methods of information transfer, which, bar a few brave people, is still largely traditional, and even the outputs are still traditional, even where BIM is being brought in. For existing infrastructure, information is poorly recorded and formatted. So for any of you who've worked in the industry, this is just standard issue. I didn't need to do any research to figure that one out. And the ability to get the right information at the right time in the right format is crucial to making the right decisions. So the methodology for the research in terms of how do we approach it. One thing I noticed, first of all, in terms of doing literature review, is that there's very little evidence or published evidence of actually asset managers or clients being involved in the direction or the accumulation or the dissemination of information in terms of BIM. It tends to be, depending where you are, design-led or contracting-led, but not so much the facilities. So I looked at what I had. I had the NRA, they had their engineering company who was advising them on the contracts, and then they had the 3 separate MARC contracts. So I looked at the top people in each of those who were charged with delivering these MARC schemes. And obviously that's a small number, 3 different contractors, so a small number of people to be interviewed. Obviously calibre played a part. So the engineers that I interviewed and the asset managers that I interviewed had range of experience between 15 and 35 years, all bar the asset management professional were all chartered engineers. So they were well grounded in what these things involve. Obviously I also looked at the literature that was set out in the MARC contracts. So from the interview findings, I considered them under a couple of headings: overall effectiveness, the historical data, data capture, level of definition, level of information of the captured data, data transfer, operational maintenance, renewal works, and future development of the asset portfolio. Basically the current MARC contracts not exactly performing the best in terms of data management. Okay. However, if we look at it, the 5 to 7 year term is a good thing, because rather than the usual thing where somebody had a budget and at the end of the fiscal year they needed to spend the budget or else they wouldn't get the money the next year, you were doing jobs at probably not the most optimum time of year. Okay? Whereas with 5 to 7 you can plan and do your work a little bit more at the optimum time of year. And obviously longer contracts, you can start to look at a bit more preventative maintenance. So has BIM a role there? I suppose first thing I should know is that they've recognised that information is important in terms of the management and maintenance. So the contracts are certainly a step forward. However, employer organisations need to understand BIM. You know, and I've met them, and these guys are working hard. Like, I think the stumbling block for a lot of companies is trying to gain knowledge in terms of BIM. So they're working very hard to get it, but they're not quite sure what they're getting. So if we can inform the employers a little bit better, I think things will work better. And to be honest, most of the questions, the plain language questions that they already ask and look to be answered, would form a very robust EIR. So it's not that different. And I've heard that a few times over the last few days, that it's not doing anything differently, it's just doing it maybe a little bit better. In terms of historical data, I won't go through the list because I'll run out of time. Basically, it's not up to scratch. Okay, there's nothing new there, as I said. So BIM role there, there's not much we can do other than to learn from mistakes. And the same mistakes we've been making for a long, long time. So we have to try something. And in fairness, the BIM approach is the best I've heard yet of a way of trying to deal with this. In terms of data capture, various different methods from as-built information, which was limited in terms of its usability. You did the mobile camera surveys, and we've seen some good stuff from Leica there earlier on what they can do. On-site inspections with your tablet. So expenditure, I was thinking, trying to capture all this data, it's going to cost an awful lot of money, but in fact they tell me it wasn't a significant amount. It wasn't significant when you consider the overall maintenance and operation costs, but there was still quite a bit of money being spent on capturing data. An example is in the UK, the guys looking after they got the 30-year contract for the ring road around London, have a 30-year contract. They're just 5 years down. It's taking them 5 years to establish exactly what asset they have. So they signed up to a contract 5 years ago to look after this road for 30 years and give it back in no worse state, but it's taking them 5 years to figure out exactly what the asset is. Okay? And the same is happening with the MARC contracts. Issues exist in terms of interpretation. Obviously, the employer is setting out, I want this information, but people are taking different interpretations as to what that is. So, BIM role, obviously applying the standards might negate the potential contract interpretation. So if you look at LOD requirements, LOI requirements, and deliverables, if you clearly stated what you want, then maybe you're going to get it a little bit better. In terms of automatic identification, and there's been a few, it's funny how I wasn't aware of the speakers that were going to come up before, but at a few presentations, this is a big thing. You can drive along, the point cloud are great, but then we need to transfer that into what is that in reality. So research is ongoing. It's great to see, because eventually we'll be able to drive that Leica machine down the road. It will scan it and it will create and identify various different things in reality and match them up virtually. And this is a big and important thing, the LOD or LOI of captured data. The problem was they were probably capturing limited data on every part of their asset system, but the LOD and the LOI varied. In some cases, it depended on the routine maintenance and management system they were using, because there would be drop-downs. You go out on site, there'd be automatic drop-downs on your tablet, you'd fill them in and you'd go back. But depending on the RMMS, you'd have different drop-downs. Okay, so the different contracts were giving you a different output, and in turn delivering back a different thing to the client. So greater specification of that was noted, and there's no automated version or method for validating correct information. So format and process for data management to be as per the standards, the British standard, the PAS 1192 standards, and LOD and LOI requirements, possibly in accordance with the recently released BIM toolkit, which at least give us some idea of how to define the level of information, level of detail that we look for. Or there's a US publication which I found good because it gave graphical illustration, but it's buildings orientated, and I think go back to the conversation that was just had here with Dr. East in terms of COBE. It's the infrastructure side. If it's the infrastructure side, we need the equivalent to those documents. So in terms of operation and maintenance, the good thing here is that because the companies who've taken on for 5 years have the various different arms. When they're doing renewal works, the asset managers are sitting in and going, this is what we need, so that they're kind of actually learning already from that. Now, the problem is the information that they're gathering, and this goes back to the interoperability issue and IFCs and whatever you want to call them. The problem is they did set out something that was meant to be pretty open. It didn't work in terms of the information going back up the NRA. They weren't getting what they wanted, so they had to revert to a proprietary system, which is disappointing. Okay, so BIM role specification of COBE aligns with industry standards. So if we all get used to using the same thing, then maybe it becomes easier for everybody to adopt it. However, in addition, say COBE would remove limitations in terms of proprietary formats. But again, some industry professionals need to be convinced that it will or will not work, and I mean that in an infrastructure sense rather than a building sense. So Renewal Works, traditional approach is still the way they do it, so 2D is all over it. Experience is kicking in where they're learning from the information that they're currently looking for in terms of the existing facility, so they're making sure that that's coming through. So the BIM role, collaboration of stakeholders is fundamental to effective BIM application and projects, and this is happening a little bit more where you have a scenario where they're working a little bit together because they're looking after the facility. This idea of soft landings, they're looking after the facility after they deliver it. Management of information during design and construction should be in accordance with the standard. This will ensure consistency of approach and deliverables and minimise the information transfer issues at handover. And supplier information exchanges may be adopted to answer the plain language questions that were raised in the EIR. In terms of future development, most interviewees deemed it a priority for the employer. So looking like we design roads for 100, 120 years, or bridges for 100, 120 years. They have a 5-year contract. Their job was to answer that contract over the 5 years. They were saying, well, it's up to the employer to take it on a bigger scale. But there is the potential, if we get it right on our primary infrastructure, that we can bring and develop that down through all of our road network, and then do global analysis to help us better predict what issues will come up and where issues will occur and how we deal with them. So in conclusion, these are probably very text orientated solutions, but I didn't know how to put these in short. Veracity, accessibility and usability of as-built information produced in accordance with the traditional approach or process is not suitable for efficient integration into asset management systems. I think everybody would generally agree with that. Significant effort is expended populating an as-is asset database from as-built information. So that was obvious. They're spending quite a lot of effort to figure out exactly what asset they're managing. Subsequent mark schemes should realise reduced costs if all the attributes are of the as-is information are put in place now. Implementation of current BIM standards to the information delivery and exchange process could provide a more robust specification for level of detail and level of information and interoperable formats, thus offering further clarity to the contract specification and potential stakeholder interpretation. An urgent need exists to standardise the format of the data. So they've done an awful lot of work, or expended an awful lot of both money and resources accumulating data. The last thing we want to do is arrive at the 2017 to 2019 period and not be able to transfer that over into whoever wins the next contract. So that's important. So in short and in conclusion, BIM should influence how we manage our existing infrastructure, but employers need to be BIM aware, and that's a challenge. They're busy. I mean, I would say I always equate myself to somebody who's trying to learn about BIM. I'm not standing up here as any expert, but somebody who has spent the last 2 to 3 years heavily trying to figure out what is this beast that we know as BIM. Okay, so employers are the same thing. They have to do a full daytime job, as I do, and then do this at the side to try and figure out how do I do my day job differently. So we need to put something in place that will help those employers, because if we get it, as I said, like health and safety, if it comes from the top, then that will help it. LOD, LOI specification needs to work. So that will take out the ambiguity as to, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to get that particular bit or attribute or whatever. So we need to get better at defining that. COBE needs to work. I think Dr. Rees is gone, is he? For he as the creator of it. What I mean is within, it needs to work for the people. And in fairness, in his last session was excellent, because it's been there for 30 years. This kind of thing will work. Why is it not being adopted? I think the fear of people to take it on and understand it at the start is an issue. And then we have the issue that was raised, that we're not looking at buildings, we're looking at infrastructure. And finally, somebody needs to take on the baton of change. And I know Alan and the group at CETA have that. I know there's various, Richard, for instance, in the company, the BAM guys are here, representatives. I hope Ralph is over here. Like, all you guys are helping it along the way, definitely helping me on my road. And that's what we need. We need somebody to take it on nationally. It was interesting when we saw Dr. Ilka May mentioned this morning that we're trying bottom up, and somebody from the audience was Professor Underwood, was it? Or Dr. Underwood said it's not going to work from bottom up because they tried it. So there's a challenge there. And in fairness, we got to try, don't we? So with that, thank you for listening, and I don't know if we're taking questions now or at the end. Okay.